Welcome back to another episode of SpitBallin. I'm your host AJ, and on this episode it will be another solo podcast episode as Christian will not be alongside me today. However, we will be talking about all the major news that has happened this past week in the NFL, and this will be the first episode that we talk NBA. We will be diving into the NBA playoffs and talk about the ongoing series occurring in the East and Western conferences. And as always, you can listen to SpitBallin at most places you find your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and TikTok under the handle at PodSpitBallin. As always, that is at POD SpitBallin. So diving right into the NFL, next week we have the schedule release occurring on May 14th at 8 p.m. where we will get to see who your favorite team is playing this season and when. Obviously, right now we know the opponents for every team. However, we don't know the dates. So we'll be getting that all on May 14th, this Thursday. We also will be seeing the fun videos that each team puts out to release their schedule. Obviously, the Chargers typically have the best one as they really poke fun at a lot of the other teams when they make their schedule release. So we will have to see what they will do this year, and we'll see if a new team dethrones them as the winners of schedule release day. Some rumors about the schedule release are that the Texans and Jaguars might be playing in London this year. It'll be a divisional game for both teams in London, which fans of the AFC South are not too happy about as they believe a divisional game should be played in Jacksonville or in Houston. However, this would be pretty big for the London market to get a big divisional game out there, as typically you don't see too many great games, I feel like, in London, but we actually had a lot of amazing games this year overseas, such as the Steelers and Vikings in Ireland, and also the Falcons and Colts, if I remember, was a very good game. And I don't exactly remember what country that was in, but I remember it being an international game. We then also saw Azeez Al-Shaair receive a 3-year, $54 million extension to stay with the Texans. I believe this is a great move for Houston, as Shaair has been a dominant force for that defense and really, I believe, just the culture of that defense, and has really elevated that defense to a whole new level that we saw last year and I think we will continue to see this year. So I believe that is a great signing for the Texans to lock him down before training camp. Don't go into training camp and next season with just some turmoil between a captain of your defense and the team. So he will be there, most likely, I assume, day one of training camp with his new contract. So I believe that is a great signing to get ahead of for the Texans. And then another player on the New York Jets who we saw get extended this past week, who I don't know he would have showed up to training camp without an extension, is Breece Hall. We see Breece Hall get a 3-year, $45.75 million deal from the New York Jets. They lock in now their franchise running back for the foreseeable future. This now makes Breece Hall the third highest paid running back in the NFL, only behind Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. Now, is Breece Hall on the level of those two guys? I don't know. That's up for interpretation. Personally, I don't think he's there, but he could get there easily. I think Breece Hall really showed last year how good he is and how good he can be on the team now with a lot more offensive weapons. Obviously, we saw the Jets take Omar Cooper Jr. and Kenyon Sadiq in this year's draft. They already had Garrett Wilson and Mason Taylor on the roster. So now locking in Breece Hall long-term and making sure he'll be on the field week one and not sitting out due to a contract dispute. This offense is setting up Geno Smith to hopefully have a exciting comeback tour in New York with the Jets. Or, as we've said on previous episodes of the podcast, this is the perfect setup for the future of your franchise that you may draft next year in the 2027 NFL draft. The Jets did also draft Cade Klubnik, however, and Cade Klubnik could end up being their guy, as we saw rookies report to minicamp this week, and Cade Klubnik being one of the rookies that looked very good in minicamp, supposedly. Cade Klubnik could be everything the Jets are looking for in a quarterback, hopefully, and they might have their guy already on their roster. However, I do think the Jets will still be aiming for a quarterback next year if they are in the, let's say, top 5 to top 10 range, as it is a quarterback-heavy class. However, this team has a lot of good pieces now, and I think could surprise a lot of people this year. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we see that according to Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, that a Rodgers deal is imminent. It was supposed to be hashed out this weekend. However, we did not get any news on a deal between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. But I do believe Rodgers will be back. I don't think Adam Schefter or Rappaport would have reported that if they didn't know for sure he's coming back. So we most likely will be seeing the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers for another year. I believe that Aaron Rodgers is probably the best person to have at quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go for it this year again. If you're going to go be competitive and go for a Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers is definitely the guy over, let's say, Will Howard or Drew Aller, as who they just drafted in this previous draft. However, then you really don't know what you have in Will Howard or even Drew Aller if you're going to just bench Will Howard again to play Aaron Rodgers, who we know what Aaron Rodgers is. Aaron Rodgers will win at least, I believe, 9 to, let's say, 12 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They will possibly make the playoffs or just miss it by a game. And realistically, by the time we hit December, January, when it's playoff time, if the Steelers are in it, Aaron might be run down like we saw occur in the playoffs last year. Now, I don't believe it was all Aaron Rodgers' fault in that playoff game. That game was 7-6 heading into the fourth quarter. A lot of people seem to forget. And realistically, I think it comes down to offensive play calling that game. The Steelers had several defensive turnovers that they got against the Texans in that game that had their offense starting inside Texans territory. However, they were just not able to even get field goals sometimes. Therefore, I do believe now having a guy like Mike McCarthy calling the plays for Pittsburgh, we are going to see Pittsburgh's offense go just completely nuclear, I believe, compared to what we've seen under Arthur Smith and previously Matt Canada. So I do believe Aaron Rodgers, as I just stated, is going to be the best option for the Pittsburgh Steelers if they're looking to compete now and win now, which with the roster they currently have with many veterans such as Cam Hayward, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey, TJ Watt. This is a team that you're going for it. You need to win now. You need to capitalize on the last couple of good years you have in Cam Hayward. Obviously, TJ Watt had a subpar year compared to previous years in his career last year, so you have to now capitalize on whatever TJ Watt has left in the tank. Jalen Ramsey has left in the tank. DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman. The list goes on for the amount of players that the Steelers have that are still, in my opinion, very valuable and great playmakers. You saw how good Jalen Ramsey was for the Steelers compared to what he did in Miami while he was there. So they have great players on the roster. They just need to really, I'd say, lock in is the word to use. And I believe they have the coaching staff to do that now. I do believe Mike McCarthy for the offense will be massive, as Arthur Smith and Matt Canada just really did not run anything that looks like advanced, nuanced NFL offenses. And I do believe Mike McCarthy brings that, and we did not see that in previous years under those offensive coordinators. And now that is pretty much all that has happened in the NFL this past week. Besides, we did see some major rookies signing their contracts, such as Jordan Tyson and David Bailey. This will be continuing to go on. We also saw Jeremiah Love sign his contract, which propels him into top running back money just based off where he was drafted. So we'll be seeing rookies sign their contracts up until training camp, most likely. Hopefully, a team is not dealing with a Shamar Stewart like the Bengals did last year, where he held out all of training camp, didn't sign his contract until, I want to say, preseason. It took a while, and then we saw that not having that training camp experience equated to a not phenomenal rookie year. So hopefully all the rookies that were drafted in the first and let's even say second round sign their contracts, get into training camp, and get going. And with that, we will be heading into the NBA playoffs. We announced last week that we would be shifting gears to the NBA while the NFL is in this lull period. We obviously had the draft the previous weeks going over the AFC and NFC draft recaps, and we obviously had free agency frenzy in the beginning. However, the NFL has now hit the point where we're not even at training camp yet, and there's no preseason yet. There's no fantasy hype even, which we will be talking about fantasy when we get into fantasy draft season. So we will be pivoting to the NBA playoffs for now, and we will always, though, as we started this episode, be giving you updates on the NFL as they come. So do not worry, we will still be covering the NFL as I just did first, and then we'll be diving into the NBA as we are now. And we are seeing all the series in the East and the West coming down to their end, as we saw the Lakers go down 3-0 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I believe the Lakers are they're just not ready for the Thunder in a sense. Luka Doncic being injured is a serious loss for the Lakers, and LeBron at 41 years old cannot take down a juggernaut like the Thunder by himself. They did get Austin Reeves back. However, Austin Reeves is not Luka Doncic. But I do believe the Lakers, if LeBron were to come back next year and play for the Lakers, as obviously there is some rumors that LeBron might play basketball next year, but it won't be for the Lakers. If the Lakers, though, retain LeBron, have Luka back healthy, I do believe that the Lakers are still a threat in the West, and we could see them make the conference finals, even finals next year. However, I do believe the Thunder will win this series, but I don't think the Thunder will sweep them. I do believe the Lakers will get one game at least in LA. I don't see LeBron getting swept. I think that's just, he would not allow that, I feel like, especially in LA, as the last game could potentially be a home game on May 11th. But I do believe LeBron will not get swept in LA, and we will see the series go back to OKC for Game 5, and then we will see OKC advance to the Western Conference Finals. And the other series out west, we have the Timberwolves and San Antonio Spurs battling out to make it to the conference finals, most likely against the Oklahoma City Thunder, unless we do see LeBron pull off a 3-0 comeback, which has never been done in NBA history. And to be honest, if there was a guy to do it, maybe it could be LeBron. But the Timberwolves and Spurs has been a very entertaining series, at the least. It's a 2-1 series with the Spurs leading, but I realistically think it is going in the direction of that Lakers series, where the Spurs I do see going up 3-1, and then that series also ending in 5. Unfortunately, with the loss of Dante DiVincenzo, the real quarterback, as you know, we talked about the NFL before this, of that team, going down with an Achilles injury in the first round, and then Anthony Edwards also getting hurt and now playing through injury. I just don't think the Timberwolves are healthy enough to make it through the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are a very good team when it comes to defense, and they have 3 guys on that team that could just throw themselves at Ant and not stop him, because you really can't stop Anthony Edwards, but limit him, and especially with him being injured, even limit him more. So I do believe that the Spurs will come out on top, and we will be seeing Oklahoma City versus San Antonio in the Western Conference Finals. And moving to we see the Detroit Pistons have a 2-1 lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pistons obviously were very close to the brink of elimination against the Magic in the first round, winning that series 4-3, coming back down 3-1. And the Pistons now up 2-1 on the Cavs, almost went up 3-0 in the Game 3. However, James Harden, who has been ridiculed for his performance so far in the playoffs, in the first round, and especially in this conference semifinals round, clutches up in the late fourth quarter for the Cleveland Cavaliers in Game 3. James Harden made a massive 3 to almost be the dagger in that game and propel the Cavaliers to their first win of the series in Game 3, making it a 2-1 series. I do believe the Pistons will come out of this series victorious, but I do think it will go to 6 games. I don't think they'll get out of it in 5, as I said, the Spurs will, and that the Thunder will be getting out of it in 5. I do think this will go to 6 games, and I even could see a Game 7 potentially. The Cavaliers are a very weird team because, as we just mentioned, James Harden, he's really on or off. It's very hard to know what James Harden you're going to see that night in a game. And if we see the James Harden that we saw in Game 3, I think this can go to 6 or 7 games. If we see the James Harden that we've seen for most of this playoffs run, I do think the Pistons could finish this series in 5. So we'll have to see what we get out of the Cavaliers each night, realistically, to see where this series is going to go. But Cade Cunningham has just been a force this year. He has been amazing in the playoffs, and Jalen Duren has been amazing as well when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. But Cade Cunningham, I mean, not an MVP candidate, as we know with the whole game limit thing, that he wasn't eligible, but then he appealed it, and now he is eligible, but he still wasn't a finalist. Cade Cunningham, though, put on an amazing season for the Pistons in the regular season and has carried that throughout the playoffs now. And I do believe we'll be seeing the Pistons advance to play a team that is already in the conference finals and in a very similar situation as they were in round 1, where their series is done and all the other series are still going on. So they will get a ample time of rest to be ready to go against, if it's the Pistons or the Cavaliers, the New York Knicks. We see sweep the Philadelphia 76ers, and it was a home game, all 4 games for the Knicks. They had 2 games at Madison Square Garden where we saw the celebrities courtside, Timothée Chalamet, Kylie Jenner, Ben Stiller, Spike Lee, and then we saw them go to Philadelphia, and it was a home game. Doesn't really geographically make sense, but as Joel Embiid says, it was MSG East. The Knicks just dominated the Philadelphia 76ers this entire series, and the Knicks, who a lot of people thought could have been out round 1 when it got a little scary against the Atlanta Hawks, now show that that was just a hiccup, and they are here, and they are in the conference finals already. And as I said, like they had in the first round, their series is over. They have now a ample amount of time to rest and get ready for the Cavaliers or the Detroit Pistons. And the Knicks are dominant right now. They scored in 4 of these games. In game 1, 137 points, and now in game 4, 44 points. Jalen Brunson looks unstoppable. Karl Anthony Towns looks the best he's ever looked as a New York Knick in the playoffs, and I really do believe that the Knicks are the team to beat in the East. I do believe this is the year for the Knicks to make the NBA Finals. As we just mentioned, the Pistons looked a bit shaky against the Magic, having to go to 7 games and battle back, being down 3-1. They are also now in a 2-1 series with the Cavs, which as I said, believe they will win, but really could go either way. I don't think the Pistons have dominated the Cavaliers in this series. And the Knicks just look unstoppable right now. Jalen Brunson, as I said, is playing the best basketball he's played all season. And OG Anunoby, who didn't even play the last 2 games in Philadelphia, will be back most likely for game 1 of the conference finals. As I have mentioned several times now, they will have an ample amount of time of rest. So I think this is huge for the Knicks. It is huge for New York, as New York has not seen the Knicks back in the finals since the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. So this would be a huge feat for the New York Knicks if they can get to the NBA Finals, or just even being in the conference finals is huge for the Knicks. Obviously, though, they want to get to the finals. They lost to the Indiana Pacers last year in the conference finals, so the next step is to get to the NBA Finals. And I do believe that this team will get there. The Knicks, as I've said, look unstoppable. And I really don't think there's a team in the East that looks better than them, to be honest. The Pistons, if that is the matchup, I do think could beat the Knicks. But I do think the Knicks will come out on top, to be honest. And in the West, I predict that the Thunder and Spurs will be in the Western Conference Finals, as I said earlier. I could not tell you how that matchup's going to go. Those 2 teams are more dominant than the Knicks. The Spurs and Thunder, I believe, if that is the matchup in the Western Conference Finals, is really the real NBA Finals. The Thunder and Spurs are 2 of the younger teams that are just loaded with talent, and I do believe that will be the real NBA Finals this year, and whichever team comes out of that series, which I will not make a prediction on now until it is official, but when that series does happen, if it does happen, which, as I said before, predict it will, I won't say yet, but I will give you my prediction on that series and how I think it'll go. But whichever team makes it out of that series, I do think they will beat the Knicks if the Knicks are the team out of the East. The Thunder and Spurs just look so much better than every single team, East and West included, in the NBA playoffs, and I do believe whoever makes it to the finals against the Knicks will beat the Knicks. I don't think in sweep fashion, I don't think we'll see the Knicks get swept 4-0 by the Thunder or Spurs, but I do think it'll be max a 6-game series, and we'll see the Thunder or Spurs be crowned as for the Thunder repeat champions 4-2, or the Spurs as champions for the first time in not in a long time, obviously the Knicks are in a long time, but in a while for the Spurs, and they will be getting Wemby his first championship. So those are my takes on the NBA playoffs this year. You will hear from Christian in our next episode about what he thinks about the ongoing NBA playoffs, and you'll hear my takes on what the NBA playoffs are next week as well, as we will most likely know what the Western Conference Finals and Eastern Conference Finals will look like next episode. And for this episode, it is a relatively shorter episode, as there was not much NFL news going on this week, and that's pretty much it to cover for the NBA playoffs. However, to round out our NBA coverage, we will be talking about the NBA draft lottery that we saw occur. The draft lottery is a very interesting concept compared to what we see in the NFL, where it's the worst record gets the number 1 overall pick. The NBA does not do it that way. And the interesting thing about that too is You would think in the NFL, knowing if you go 0-16, you're guaranteed the first overall pick, that more teams would tank and they would go get the Fernando Mendozas of the draft or the Caleb Williams of the NFL draft. However, you don't really see NFL teams tank. The New York Jets, for example, being a perfect example about teams who fans want them to tank, and then they end up winning meaningless games come December, and they don't end up with the number one overall pick. However, in the NBA, tanking was a massive issue this year, and they still have a draft lottery, which is supposed to prevent tanking because even though you have the worst record in the NBA, you're not guaranteed the number one overall pick. But the draft lottery was pretty surprising today, to be honest. We see the Hornets and Heat be at picks 14 and 13, followed by the Thunder and Warriors at 12 and 11. Then the Bucks at 10 and the Mavericks at 9, followed by the Hawks and Kings at 8 and 7. And then this is where the lottery got exciting. We saw Brooklyn, who was projected top 3, fall all the way to 6. This is a big blow for Brooklyn Nets fans, and I really feel sorry for them, as you saw MPJ really have an explosive year for the Nets this year. And if you were able to get either Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsta, Cam Boozer, Darius Acuff even on that team, I think that would just be such a boost for the Nets. However, they will be picking at 6, and there will still be good players available at 6, just you will not be able to go after the top 4 guys in this draft class. Then I'm going to skip pick 5 for now because I think that was the most interesting placement of this lottery. We then see the Bulls get pick 4, followed by the Grizzlies at 3, the Jazz at 2, and winning the draft lottery was the Washington Wizards, who they come out as, my opinion, the not biggest winners, because the team that got pick 5, which we'll get into soon, my opinion, were the biggest winners, but the Wizards were, I'd say, the second biggest winners of this draft lottery. They end up with pick number 1, and they get to now choose if they want AJ DeBonsta, Peterson, or Darius Acuff, or Cam Boozer. They could really go any direction that they want, and we'll really have to see where they go in this NBA draft. And I do believe that AJ DeBonsta or Darren Peterson is probably the best fit for the Wizards because they really don't need Boozer, as they have Anthony Davis and they have Trae Young, so I don't think they need Darius Acuff. However, the Wizards are going to be a team to watch out for next year, making the midseason acquisitions of Trae Young and Anthony Davis. You now have 2 veterans on the squad that have championship experience with Anthony Davis and amazing playoff experience in Trae Young. And I do believe having Sarr and now possibly DeBonsta or Darren Peterson, I think, would be the best fit for that team. Alongside them, this team is looking dangerous. Their projected starting lineup most likely would be Trae Young, Keyshawn George, I'd say, and then either Darren Peterson or DeBonsta at the 3, with Anthony Davis and Alex Sarr rounding out the power forward and center spots. And the Wizards, my opinion, could easily be a playoff team next year with that roster. Obviously, they do have to fill out the rest of the roster and get a better bench going, but I at least believe they will be a play-in team next year with that roster. And the Utah Jazz, another team that we now see get pick number 2, and we could see AJ DeBonsta staying in Utah if he does not go number 1 overall, and the Wizards go with Darren Peterson over DeBonsta. The Utah Jazz get Jaren Jackson in a midseason trade with the Memphis Grizzlies. They already have Lauri Markkanen, who's been amazing for them, and we'll really see what the Jazz can do with this pick, depending who they go with. I believe getting DeBonsta or Peterson at pick 2 to pair alongside Jaren Jackson, Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, and Keontae George. I think Darren Peterson probably fits best there because then your lineup would be Keontae George, Darren Peterson, Markkanen, Jaren, and Walker Kessler. That is a dangerous starting 5, especially defensively with Jaren and Walker being at power forward and center. I do believe that the Jazz could be a also fringe playoff team, definitely a play-in team with that lineup next year. And to finish off talking about the draft lottery, the team that we skipped at pick number 5, the Los Angeles Clippers. This is my biggest winner of the NBA draft lottery, purely because the Clippers weren't supposed to get this pick according to analytics and statistics about how the lottery is supposed to work. The Indiana Pacers were supposed to have this land in the top 4, and they would have received it. The Pacers and Clippers made a midseason trade, which sent Ivica Zubac to the Indiana Pacers in exchange for Benedict Mathurin and the Pacers' first round pick this year, but it was top 4 protected. So if the pick landed in the top 4, the Pacers would have retained it and still had Zubac. So then essentially the trade was just Benedict Mathurin for Zubac, and they would have a top 4 pick with Zubac attached to it, which would have been an amazing trade for the Pacers. But now it's an amazing trade for the Clippers, as the pick did not fall inside the top 4, and if it fell 5 to 9, it would go to the Clippers. It fell to pick 5, and the Clippers got Benedict Mathurin and now the 5th overall pick for Zubac. I believe that is an amazing trade for the Clippers, because Zubac, as he's a great center, in my opinion, in this league, is not getting any younger at 29 years old, and clearly the Clippers are heading towards the rebuild. We did see them trade James Harden for Darius Garland midseason as well. So now you have Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin, Kawhi Leonard still there, and the 5th overall pick in this NBA draft. Realistically, the Clippers come out as real winners in this draft lottery. I believe that the Clippers really could go any direction with this pick. Obviously, DeBonsta and Peterson and Boozer most likely are off the board, and possibly Darius Cuff at pick 4. And then at pick 5, Caleb Wilson, in my opinion, would be the best player for them to go with out of North Carolina. One of the better forwards in college basketball this year. Obviously, his season was cut short due to injury in the end. However, I believe if you draft Caleb Wilson, you're drafting a perfect successor for when Kawhi eventually will retire. He's not getting any younger as well. So now you'd have a young core of Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin, and Caleb Wilson. I believe this a absolute win for the Clippers. You essentially saw the Clippers trade at the deadline Ivica Zubac and James Harden for the 5th overall pick, Benedict Mathurin and Darius Garland. That is an amazing return for what they sent out. And obviously James Harden, a very much not getting younger, aging star. And then Zubac at 29 on the younger side compared to Harden, but also aging and just not on their timetable. We'll see if Kawhi Leonard is also dealt this summer, as I don't know if it'll happen. I believe Kawhi enjoys being in LA. I don't think he'd want to go to another team. However, it's a business at the end of the day, and if the Clippers are going full rebuild and really going to build a young core around Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin, and whoever they pick at pick number 5, trading away Kawhi Leonard for another young piece to pair with those 3 guys would be a very smart move by the front office, and they'd most likely get some draft compensation with whatever player they'd also get back for Kawhi Leonard, as Kawhi Leonard had an amazing season this year, and really, unfortunately, nobody else really on the Clippers was great this year outside of Kawhi. And then we did see them make the play-in, unfortunately lose in the play-in and not make the playoffs. But I do believe that if Kawhi does stay in LA, it would be a very good move for the Clippers to keep him there and mentor Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin, and whoever they really do end up taking at pick number 5. And that is pretty much going to do it for our NBA coverage this week. And as we previously spoke about the ongoing news in the NFL. I hope you enjoyed this shorter episode of the SpitBallin podcast. As I stated before, there was really not much NFL news this week, and breaking down the NBA playoffs does not take as long as breaking down 16 teams, round 1 to round 7 draft picks. So this is going to be a shorter episode of the pod for this week, but I hope you guys still enjoyed. And before we go, I do have one last spitball for you guys. I believe, and I'm going to switch it to the NBA here, since this is our first episode covering the NBA. I believe that with the Memphis Grizzlies getting pick number 3, as we saw them trade Jaren Jackson, as I mentioned, to the Utah Jazz, I think we'll see the Grizzlies go full reset and really build around Cedric Coward and Zach Edey, and we will see Ja Morant traded this offseason. I think it is the end of that era in Memphis. We saw Dylan Brooks be the first one to leave, then Jaren Jackson, and now I think it is Ja's time to head elsewhere. My prediction of where he will go, I could see it being Miami. I could see Pat Riley going to get his star finally. I could also see the Heat maybe getting Giannis this offseason. But my last spitball is that the Memphis Grizzlies will be trading Ja Morant this offseason. I hope you guys enjoyed this shorter episode of the SpitBallin podcast. As always, you can find us most places you find podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and TikTok under the handle @PodSpitBallin. That is @POD Spitballin. And as always, keep spitballing, everybody.